Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday vlog where we discuss activity that goes on here with the channel, current events, headlines that are in the news, pop culture, technology, and items of interest that come up that allow us to have a little bit of a dialogue, a little bit of a departure from what we typically cover here on the channel. So this is kind of an introductory type segment that is here each week. If you're new to the channel, I want to welcome you guys here. For all my existing subscribers, thank you guys so much for your support. And if you haven't already, be sure you click on that watermark down there in the bottom right-hand corner to subscribe to the channel so you guys can continue to receive all the coverage that's here on the channel. This week in Los Angeles, they had the Electronics Entertainment Expo, or E3 as it's called, because, you know, in the technology world, you got to use acronyms and nomenclatures to be able to describe whatever it is that you're doing. They can't just simply call it the Electronics Expo. I mean, that's insane. Why call it something like that? Anyway, so during the weekend, attendees were kind of suggesting that it was a bit lackluster, or kind of subdued, or even conservative. I heard them actually use that term, which was kind of surprising. But nonetheless, suffices to say that my attention was really on just a few games and not like the overarching different offerings that they had there. But mostly over the weekend, they said it was kind of subdued, mainly because they wanted to save all the reveals for later into the week when it was actually kicking off full speed. So anyway, I thought it was kind of amusing because Command & Conquer, a strategy game back from the late 90s, was being introduced, and everyone thought, oh, well, you know, that maybe it's new for the PC, but in reality, it's just the mobile phone. Nonetheless, I did focus a lot on the release and reveal of Battlefield 5. Jack Frags did a little bit of gameplay, so I was pretty enthusiastic and probably going to pick the game up. It looks pretty nice. I like that they mentioned a lot about some of the newer mechanics when it comes to firearms in the game, as well as the physics and the graphics and just the way the game performs, and some of the modes too that they're going to be introducing in gameplay. So that should make it all very interesting. So yeah, I am looking forward to that. But the overall E3 seems like just a lot of it they were mentioning was very similar to last year. So maybe they just felt that with whatever success they had last year, they kind of wanted to repeat that this year, maybe not go too over the edge or do anything that might upset the rather fickle fan base, because of course gamers can be rather fickle, rather passionate about their games, and so if they don't necessarily like what they hear or like what they see, yeah, they're definitely going to be vocal about it. But anyway, so E3 was this weekend, and kind of nice to see that Battlefield 5 is looking good, considering all of the concern that people had about the trailer when it first was released. So thankfully it was made up for by gameplay. Without a doubt, probably the biggest headline throughout the world was Donald Trump meeting Kim Jong-un there in Singapore, Malaysia. Now, I watched kind of a little bit of all the media throughout the world, including Canada, the UK, France, and just kind of to get an impression from each of them as to how they were going to approach this, what narrative they were going to adopt with this, because this is a rather astounding accomplishment, just not for the United States alone, but for the world and even for Donald Trump, because these are things that the mainstream media here in the United States kind of attribute to being something that Trump is not capable of. And of course, naturally, the mainstream media here in the United States have been constantly attacking Trump since day one he got into office, and they continue to do so. And parts of the world share in the same type of deluge of animus towards the president. But suffice it to say, that aside, I think there's a few things that I wanted to point out to you guys that maybe you didn't hear from your media in other parts of the world, and even those here in the United States. And that is that Pompeo had been meeting there in China for quite some time. And the interesting thing here is how the United States was able to convince China to actually, for the very first time, levels of sanction against North Korea, which kind of did bring a lot of attention to North Korea, because for the most part, they're pretty much protected as kind of a puppet country of China. So yeah, so denying them a little bit of their resources that China provides them did get their attention. So they knew it was time to come to the negotiation table. And there's another thing too. Naturally, we kind of understand what goes on there in North Korea. It's rather tragic and shocking, especially what we saw with Warmbier when he was released back to the United States. But it was an opportunity for these leaders to actually meet, and that's significant because it has to start somewhere. we can't continue to just ignore North Korea and just leave that country isolated and alienated simply because, yeah, it's a dictatorship. It's the way they treat their people is awful. As a matter of fact, it's important that people see this and understand what it's like to be under a tyrannical communist regime, because there are people here in this country that have this fantasy about socialism and fantasy about communism, and they don't really understand what it really is because they live in the comfort, the surroundings of the United States that actually protect them from even their own ideological miscues that they have. But suffice to say here that a lot of credit goes to Donald Trump. He doesn't get a lot, or it isn't focused on by the mainstream media because they really don't like to give Trump any kind of credit if possible. But there was a lot accomplished here. So now, what they were really trying to be partially critical of, and even the Greta Van Susteren interview was one that kind of was slightly cringy for some people. And that is something that we talked about with when I was covering the ADV China with Winston and Matt. And that is, there's a thing in Asia, it's predominantly in China, but it's also shared throughout there. It's something called face. And face is kind of a way that you show adulation or a respect, a certain reverence towards an individual. And it's just kind of like what you would show for your boss or someone in those countries in a higher status or class, or maybe they're a general or something in the military. What you do is you just give them a little bit of extra attention, a little bit of praise. And that's basically what was achieved or perceived probably from some more of the Asians, right? Because the United States were like, you know, well, Trump needed to go in there and be tough because this guy's a tyrannical dictator that kills his own people, and we're aware of this. I mean, there's no mystery of what goes on in North Korea, or even the human rights violation that even goes on there in China, but more specifically North Korea. So Trump had to go into this with that mindset. And see, again, we've talked about this before, where the West has a certain mindset, a certain ideology, a certain philosophy, ethics, morals, and worldview that, look, we're very civil, we're very cordial, we exercise decorum, and we have all of these particular policies and strategies throughout the world to keep peace and, of course, to look benevolent and competent. So the thing is, that isn't always what translates into other countries. There's different cultures, there's different mindsets. So we're just going to have to wait for this to unfold. But I think Trump received a lot of unnecessary, I guess you could say, a lack of cultural understanding by the mainstream media. Or maybe they know and they just want Americans who may not be familiar with this methodology of interaction to feel like, oh, wow, why didn't Trump address this? Why didn't he do that one? It doesn't matter what Trump does. He's going to be attacked at every level. If you saw last week's video, I wanted to include that segment there with Sarah Huckabee Sanders so you guys could see the kind of nonsense that the mainstream media levels towards the administration every single day. Now, I'm not trying to go off on a tangent with Trump here. I just wanted to illustrate here the significance of what this was. And, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on when it comes politically. This was a very significant event. This is an illustration, to me, in my opinion, of Trump's genuineness to actually do things that are going to benefit not only the world, but the United States of America. And people really need to sit back, reflect on that, and look at yourselves, look at your own lives, look at things that have changed here in the United States that has helped improve this country. It may not be things you agree with, but it is going to be beneficial in the long run. Also this week, if we didn't have so much activity already going on, is the World Cup in Russia. Starting on the 14th of June, we will see Russia play for the first time. They will be the host country, so they get the opening game. So I'm looking forward to watching those. Now, for us here in the United States, football for us, of course, is American football. But everywhere else in the world, football is soccer, or football for everyone else. And we may pride ourselves here in the United States when we can get as many as 700 million people watching our amazing Super Bowl that last year only, a few cities in the United States were really overly enthusiastic. Everybody else was just kind of sitting back and watching and see what was going to happen. But when it comes to the Super Bowl here, yeah, we might get about 700 million people watch it. But when it comes to the World Cup, we're talking billions of people that watch the sport. Now, I'm pretty enthusiastic about soccer. I like soccer. I've always liked it. Maybe it's because my mother being from Central America, where soccer, of course, is incredibly popular. But for me, another reason too is the Atlanta United team. Our team here in Atlanta is the #1 Major League Soccer team thus far in the league. So I'm pretty happy about that. But I am looking forward to seeing the World Cup soccer this year in Russia. That's going to wrap it up for this Friday vlog. Another one in the can, as they say in the business, the old school business of radio. Nonetheless, guys, if you haven't already, be sure you click on the channel mark you see appearing here on the screen to subscribe to the channel. Guys, as always, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for being part of the Friday vlogs each week, and I will see you guys next Friday.